There's a narrative going on right now in regards to the election audit, specifically the one in Maricopa County, and then ones proposed in other states as well, like in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or maybe Georgia. The narrative goes like this. The Republicans are only bringing these audits in states that were won by Joe Biden, and more specifically, only in critical swing states where if the results were the opposite, in even a couple of them, then Donald Trump would be the president and Joe Biden wouldn't. This is fueled by a sort of parallel narrative that the purpose of the audits is to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Despite the fact that whenever asked this question, directly, indirectly, even without being asked, the people requesting the audits and the people conducting the audits say the purpose of this audit is not to impact the 2020 election. In fact, they're not really sure of any legal mechanism by which that could happen. There's not really a process to do that under the Constitution as it sits right now, so they're not really concerned about doing it in that way. What they're after is data and understanding and verification. They want data about the election. They want understanding about what that data means and what it means in our modern voting system. And then they want verification. They want verification that the election has integrity, that the votes that were reported are the votes that were cast, that the counting procedures are good, that they produce reliable and trustworthy and truthful results. Those are the things that the audits are intended to accomplish. But that criticism remains. Why are you only doing that in these counties? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. We don't really need to get into them. You guys know why they're doing them in these states. It's because these states are the ones with questions. But they're not the only states with questions, and they're not the only states where audits are being proposed. The newest one is coming out of a Trump safety zone, and that is Texas. That's right. Texas is now proposing an audit, and it's kind of interesting. Let's take a look at it. I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer. I'm also a legal and political commentator on YouTube and on Odyssey. Wherever you're watching, go ahead, hit that like button, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Don't miss any videos. And if you're watching on YouTube, they just added a new feature that you should definitely not be doing, but it's kind of funny. You can actually give a little tip for a video at the end. So don't do it. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. Anyway, here we go. Texas Republicans propose audit of Democrat-heavy counties. This is from The Hill, and that's right. They're like, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. We're going to audit these big cities. And before we even get into the article, and this is not a friendly article to this idea, not friendly at all. Of course, it's from The Hill. They hate the audits. They not big fans of Republicans in general. But let's just say something before we get into their narrative. Let me weave you my own for just a second. Okay? Why are Republicans in Texas going after Democrat-heavy counties? Oh, it's because they want to undo Democrat votes. No, actually, it's because those Democrat-heavy counties were the ones that were least likely, openly, it's not a secret, they were least likely to follow the actual law put in place by Texas legislatures, signed into law by the Texas governor. They were the ones shirking those laws. Harris County, Collin County, these are places where we saw Democrats fighting against the laws that were on the books in these counties. They had lawsuits going against them, trying to change how the election played out. They had lawsuits going beforehand, trying to say that the restrictions that Republicans had put in place were somehow racist, that they were doing this. These counties, the Democrat-heavy counties, the largest counties in Texas, the 13 largest counties, that's what they're talking about. These counties are the ones that have the highest propensity for the election law to not be followed. And we know that because they said they didn't want to follow it. That's why they would do it. That's the actual story here. That's the reality. These counties told the Texas legislature that they didn't want to fight or that didn't want to follow their laws. And they told them that in lawsuits against the Texas legislature and the Board of Elections and the governor and the Secretary of State and all that stuff. That's what they did. So that's why these are the counties that are being audited. But let's see what the Hill has to say about it. A Texas Republican, notice how they're already going for the narrative, who tried to void more than 250,000 legally cast ballots in last year's election, has introduced legislation in the House of Representatives that would force a forensic audit of the 2020 election results in the state's largest counties. State Rep Steve Toth has introduced legislation along with 15 other Republicans that would require Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and State House Speaker Dade Phelan to hire an outside expert to conduct a forensic audit of counties with populations greater than 415,000. Now, before we go on, I want to point out something about Texas. It is one of the few states that actually takes legitimate cases of voter fraud seriously. You know, one of the things, let's get rid of that article for a second. One of the things that's been talked about during all of the election talk, when people have brought up fraud for the past couple election cycles, the counter narrative is always this: well, in the last election, there were only 6 prosecutions for fraudulent votes. Okay, listen here. The way our election systems are set up make it extremely difficult. We have secret elections. We do not allow the government to know how we voted, and that is good. That is a good thing. The government cannot trace a ballot to an individual 99.9% of the time. They just can't do it. So, to get a prosecution and to successfully prosecute a voter fraud case, you almost have to have an admission from the party that they cheated. You have to have them admitting that they drove to different polling places, because you can't verify, even if you saw them at different polling places, even if you had pictures, can't verify that they actually put a ballot in the box, because you can't trace the vote that was cast to a person casting it. And like I said, on balance, that's a good thing. We don't want our governments knowing how we voted, because what if you voted for the other guy and they just determined that a random group of people would be shot in the head tomorrow? Then that would turn out pretty bad for the person who voted for the other guy. That's just how it goes. That's how tyranny works. So we have this anti-tyranny measure that makes it hard to prosecute. That makes it easier to do these things. But all of this is to say, Texas is the one state that takes these allegations seriously and prosecutes them vigorously. They go after people who cast multiple ballots, probably more often than any other state, and certainly more publicly. Texas has a history of trying to preserve the integrity of its elections in regards to fraudulent ballot casting. That's what they do. It comes out every election cycle, and they currently have a bunch of prosecutions going. Is it enough to overturn any election? No, of course not. It's really, really hard to do these cases at all, much less on the scale required, because we're talking typically in these prosecutions, it's about one person voting in 2 or 3 different counties, and that comes out to just a couple votes. But that's how it goes. That's how people are doing these things, and that's what Texas is going after. An audit is fully within the character of Texas, no matter how the Hill wants to spin the story of them going after Democrats or whatever. Texas goes after voter fraud, and they're one of the states that leads the charge on it. And they have been for a while now. Texas has 13 counties. 13 counties with populations greater than 415,000 residents. President Biden won 10 of those 13 counties, though former President Trump carried Texas 38 electoral votes by a nearly 6-point margin. And that's of course the Democrat strategy in every state. If you look at a map of the election results, you see a sea of red with islands of blue. Those islands are major metropolitan centers. 90% of the time. That's how it works. They concentrate votes into a place where they can concentrate people onto the teat of government by getting them into welfare, into food stamps, into low-income housing, and having the government become the provider. And by government, I mean the Democrat Party. That's how things tend to operate as far as voting distribution goes. That's not a secret. That's not a conspiracy. That is evident in every single election. It's how it works. But that being said, we need a forensic audit to uncover all the voter fraud, Toth said in a statement. Texans want to know more about the claims of voter fraud and deserve to have confidence in their elections. Toth did not address the root of those claims of voter fraud, many of which have come from Republicans and from Trump himself, none of whom have offered evidence of widespread voter fraud or election malfeasance, which, again, this is the Hill's narrative, and it's fine. It's fine. But we know what's going on with this call for it. If you know much at all about the history of Texas on the voter fraud issue, they've been going hard on it for a while. Oh yeah, that's one more thing I wanted to talk about. It's the next paragraph. That's the last one. Attorney General Ken Paxton's office says it is in the process of prosecuting 43 individuals for a combined 510 cases of alleged voter or election fraud. Those cases are spread over multiple elections. And that is, again, characteristic of Texas. It is a state that goes hard in the paint on voter fraud. It prosecutes people when it finds out that they've done it. It is an issue that they talk about publicly, and these audits are perfectly within the character of the state, no matter how anybody else wants to spin them. And as for me, I'm shocked we don't audit more elections, to be honest. That, to me, has been the biggest reveal of the 2020 election, is just how little public review happens in elections of the most important leadership positions in the world. And those are those of the U.S. federal government. The president, the House, the Senate, those elections literally control the scope and course of the entire planet. And yet, we don't even know if the votes that were cast are the ones that are counted. And we literally don't, because we don't verify it. And there is no public review of it. It's just a small group of people counting ballots and then saying, trust us, we certified the results. And I think Americans are tired of that. This isn't about overturning elections. This isn't about anything like that. It's about taking control of the truth of what's been going on and finding out what that even is. Because up until now, we've been complacent to not even ask. And that's changing. That's what's got a lot of people very, very scared and upset. They shouldn't be, though, because we have robust election protections. We have robust legal structures around the election. And all of those legal structures are perfect and work just great. So there's nothing to worry about, right, guys? Right? 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 I don't know. Tell me what you think. Drop a comment down below. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good day. Peace. Peace.